It had been so late on the eve of New Year's Eve, when Chandler had finally got back to the apartment, that it had been early. Clicking open a lock of the door which he had slammed nearly 12 hours before, he closed it quietly, holding it closed when he was on the other side of it. Admittedly, he had not spent all 12 hours looking for Joanna. After it had got to 2 a.m., and he had found himself in Central Park, the homeless and the drug-addicted beginning to come out in force, he had decided to take a walk, which had taken him to the city's Port Authority, back round to the Battery and then through the village. It truly was a city that didn't sleep. Admittedly, it was the holiday season, and more people were going to be around. The roads were as packed as ever with cabs and cars, especially around the central area. What had happened? He looked around the dark, still apartment where he had allowed his ex-best friend to call a number which his son had illicitly stolen about 3 weeks ago, and had heard that his friend, the friend who had got him that amazing gift, the friend who he was looking forward to all week to come back, while he spent time with his son, daughter and had a strained time with his ex-in-laws in the city. Sinking down onto the settee, Chandler saw the record, its brick-walled design and graffiti-like writing staring back at him, reflected by the lights from the street outside. He glared at it for a moment, as if all of this were Rob Gilmore's fault, then closed his eyes. Married. Why ever would she not be? She had children after all, and she had never explicitly said that she was not. His mind too perturbed to get to the bottom of his thoughts, so it could crystallize what it was trying to tell him about Joanna Lucas. Chandler got back up, made and drank coffee, showered, then, about 2 hours before the other occupants were even thinking about getting up, sank down onto his bed, his head enveloped by the pillow, and was asleep. 88,888,888. I told you, I heard him come in around 5, insisted Jack, as he sat eating a bacon sandwich at the apartment's small table. Joey Tribbiani had just put a cup of coffee in front of him, the steam from which curled into the air before the young actor as he looked up to his mentor. I woke up and was about to go to the bathroom. Dad was sitting right there. And then he went to the bathroom and went to bed. From his room, Chandler stirred at the voice of his son, who was put out a little that he was going to be understudying the matinee performance at the theater, but who was reassured by Joey that his sister, uncle, aunt and cousin would take care of everything. I got it all worked out, said Joey, taking a sip of coffee. And, you get to talk to Ryan Jones. Just as Jack was about to establish who Ryan Jones was, his father strode out of his room, rubbing his eyes, and yawning. Late night, Dad? Asked Jack, sarcasm in his voice. What time were you back last night? About 4:30, said Chandler, glancing over to Joey. And I don't know where she is. Hey, man, said Joey, sympathetically. That's tough. She don't know the city at all. And to just take off like that. Well, he said, giving his son a disapproving look, wouldn't you have? Dad, Joey's got me a conference call to London, to speak to the actor playing my part. Joey managed to get some good consultation in, and we are adapting a couple more scenes. Jack, that's great, Chandler said, accepting the coffee that Joey had poured for him. So, you off to the theater? Agreed Jack, through a bite of his bacon sandwich. And Erica and the others are going to fix up the place for tonight. Jack, Chandler began, glancing at his friend again. May I just say dash? Look, Dad, I am sorry that I kept the number, he began. But Chandler hushed him up. I know why you did it, he said, patting his son on the shoulder. But, there are right and wrong ways to go about things. So, you gonna speak to Mom then? He said, she'll be over this evening after work. Chandler nodded. He had something to discuss with her too, and her Christmas gift which, in light of the events of Christmas Day, he had considered it would be an inappropriate time. Glad we got that sorted out, he said, draining his cup. Don't do that again, Jack. Joanna is a work colleague, nothing more. Dumping the cup into the apartment sink and striding over to the door, he added, I'll back to help later, too. Where? Asked Jack, frowning. To look for her. Why? Demanded Jack, his face frowning. Why not just call her? Asked Joey. Don't have her number. He saw his son's expression, one of disbelief settle on his features. He was clearly having none of his father's half-explanations. I do, said Joey, slipping out his phone and staring at the screen. Why? So's we could call one another when getting back on the flight. Yes, thought Chandler, looking down at the touch screen. Of course. That made perfect sense. When Jo had come back from seeing her family at Christmas. Then, can I have it? He said, as Joey looked at him. I don't know, man. He began. But Chandler interrupted him. Well, he said, hands on hips. Let me just establish the facts. You won't let me call her, because you don't want me to speak to her. Yet, you took down the number out of her wallet and let Ross call it? And you, he turned to his son, you went through that wallet, and kept the number all this time? At Chandler's calling out of them both, Jack and Joey exchanged looks. Okay, agreed Joey, have her number, and he read it out as Chandler carefully inputted it into his phone. After a few seconds of ringing, the phone clicked and Joe's voice said, Hello? Joe, said Chandler, nodding to Joey. It's me, he added, lamely, ignoring Joey pointing at himself, and grinning when Chandler said her name. Hello, from the other side. Ha, sorry, bad joke. Thank you for calling, said her answering machine message. I'm not available to take your call just now, so please leave your name and number and I'll get back to you. Chandler put the phone down without leaving the message. What did you do that for? He stared at his phone blankly for a second. Don't know. I thought it was her, and then it wasn't. Look, I'll do it, said Joey, and called from his own phone, as Chandler looked around the apartment. I thought she might have come back last night, he added, sinking down onto a kitchen chair as Joey waved at him to be quiet as he listened on the phone. It'd make me feel much better if I found out where she was. After the same message, Joey left one of his own, asking after her, and inviting her to the party, much to the resentful expression on his honorary godson's face. Okay, I'll see you later, said Chandler, when Joey had turned off his phone, and then strode through the doorway before either Joey or Jack could say anything. 88,888,888. Just after 3 p.m. on New Year's Eve, and about 24 hours after leaving the place with Joe the day before, Chandler sank down onto the elderly, orange settee, drinking deeply from a cup of strong black coffee and biting into a bacon, lettuce and tomato sandwich. Where was she? He thought, glancing around, a part of his mind considering that the coffee house simply hadn't changed in nearly 25 years. Then, as he swallowed his sandwich and sipped his coffee, the hope of finding having slowly leaked out of him like a tiny hole in a bottle of water, he considered that she could well be on her way back to Marshall by herself. No, he thought again, screwing up his eyes. Yes, of course she could be going back, she was independent and resilient. But, transport back to North Dakota, there would be a Greyhound or a flight. It was possible that. And then a thought struck him, causing Chandler to abandon his coffee and sandwich and bolt out of the coffee house, leaving a bemused Gunter looking after him. 88,888,888. That'll be $20, sir, said the man at the turnstile as Chandler reached for his wallet, having paid the cab driver. The Twin Towers Memorial was packed with tourists and it was hard to see beyond the perimeter of the buildings and into the 9/11 Memorial. It had been an effort to go downtown. To say that the whole of the country, the whole of the world had not been in mourning for the longest time after such a catastrophic event was an understatement. He had been at Diamond and Hope by then, having moved from the North Tower, and his mind had blocked out much of what concerned him about the attack. Sir, the man insisted, as a queue was beginning to form behind Chandler on this increasingly cold afternoon, if you wanna go in you gotta pay. He pointed out the entrance fee sign behind him. $20. Come on, insisted voices behind him, it's cold out here. $20 later and Chandler was descending the steps into the lower part of the memorial. Around him, faces of the victims looked back at him, a citation from family members next to them. It had been the first time he had visited, to his shame, and, as he descended, he was flooded with memories, thoughts and feelings of that day, a Tuesday, just as he was crossing the city to work. He had worked there, once. And, had terrorists chosen the day a few years sooner, he would be there, his picture a foot high with calm comforting words from his own family. Perhaps it was his own sense of mortality which had kept him from coming here. That, and knowing if he looked hard enough, even after 17 years, there would be still faces he recognized, even if their names and their jobs were long gone from his memory. He might still have been there had he not got together with Monica and finally, decided to plan his life. He had left colleagues behind. He knew where he had been that day, the day people had thrown themselves out of windows to their deaths on the pavement below as a preferable way to die than burning in the inferno from which there was no escape. Turning to go, Chandler turned back as saw a view, an image of a person who he had been looking for. She was walking away from him at the far end of the hall. She had come here, Joe, the English. She had come for the solitude and peace she said this place had. Joanna. Joe. Chandler didn't even remember telling his brain to scream her name across the hall. Several faces turned to look at him. Joe did not turn. Had she heard him? Even if she had, she didn't turn her head. He stepped back down the one step and walked with purpose to where Joe was walking, but she disappeared around the side of one of the displays, looking over her shoulder before she went. Chandler slowed his pace to nothing when he saw her face. It wasn't Joe. She wasn't here. She wasn't, it seemed, anywhere. 88,888,888. The music from the party echoed down the hall on the third floor of the apartment block. Door open, it was much like any one of the millions of parties which were happening all over the country to welcome in a new year and see out an old. Chandler had got back around 6 to see his ex-wife and her brother decorating, with the filming aspects of the party preparations for their YouTube video. "Hey, man," Joey had said, when he got back with Jack a couple of hours later. Chandler had said nothing to Monica and Ross, nor to Emma and Erica either about where he had been. Instead he had got to work helping get the apartment into a state of decoration, but when guests had begun to arrive he had found a quiet place near the corner of the window to sit and observe the people who his son had invited. "I've got some Coke you can have," said Joey, offering him the bottle before sitting down next to him. "You did a really good thing today." "Well, someone had to," said Chandler. "Those olives weren't going to stuff themselves." "No, come on, man, I mean Joanna. I was sure she would call me back. I was sure you would find her, seeing as how determined you've been." "I guess," he said, taking the Coke. "I just wish I could have seen her, to talk to her." Just then, the apartment's landline rang. Chandler sat forward, Joey stared, as Jack answered it. "Hey, Mom. Uncle Ross," he called, holding the handset to his chest. "It's a call for you." Ross hovering nearby as Erica stood next to her dad, asking what his favorite part of the holidays had been as Emma filmed. "Being with my family, and especially my gorgeous daughter," Chandler replied, a fitting response to them as he hugged her. "Mine has been the play," said Joey, pitching in quickly before the camera got taken away, "and that your brother is in it." Erica gasped, putting her hands to her face before leaning around the lens of the camera and grinning. Yes, oh Emma," Erica exhorted. And to our loyal followers, a quick mention that the Cursed Child play is still running on Broadway right now. My brother Jack is in it, and, yes, if you use the discount code below 2S10. By the way, added Emma, turning the camera onto herself. Not sponsored. But you know the play is fantastic, right? She turned the camera back onto Joey. Aha, nodded Joey in agreement. Come see our play, it's wizard. He sat back down as Emma and Erica moved on to another group of people. Chandler distinctly heard Emma say to Erica, "That's one for the bloopers." "Hey, Joey," said Ross, nodding briefly to Chandler. "Phoebe and Mike are on their way, They're just dropping off Lily with Mike's parents. Oh, that'll be great to see Phoebe, said Joey, grinning at Chandler before poking him in the arm as an encouragement to emotion. It's a long way from Canada. Yes, nodded Chandler, not knowing what else today. It will be good to see Phoebe and Mike. Ross looked between Joey and Chandler. Hey, I'm sorry to hear about this woman, he said, and really looked genuinely sorry. Maybe she's alright, you know? Chandler nodded slowly to Ross, toasting him pointedly with his non-alcoholic drink. You know what palliative care is, right, don't you, Ross? Well yeah. He replied. Joey shook his head. Ross turned to him. It's care for people who are ill, very ill, who won't make it, Joey. Chandler sipped at his Coke silently as if it really were adding life, after the memory of his visit to Ground Zero that afternoon had sucked a lot of it out. God, this husband of hers, the neurosurgeon, sounds like a saint. But, replied Chandler, as Ross sat down next to Joey, she never talked of a husband before. He must be making a fortune and she's out here, struggling. You should see where she lived. Animals at the zoo have better. In fact, sometimes I wonder how Continental can justify it for anyone. Maybe they're separated, or divorced? Ross suggested. Then why call her? You told me that, Joey, he accused, staring at his friend for a second. Don't think about it, man. She might be on a plane back home, right now, for all we know. Bud? Asked Jack, approaching his dad with a beer. Chandler shook his head. No thanks, he said, but if you just leave it up on the shelf there, I can accidentally take a sip and be accused of being an irresponsible alcoholic again. They didn't exactly call you that, said Ross, getting up. And, to be fair, you were, when you were married to my sister. Without saying anything, Chandler raised his glass in a mock toast as Phoebe and Mike arrived, greeting everyone as they came in. Why hasn't she called, Joe? Lamented Chandler as Ross left them to talk to Phoebe. Jack sat down in his place. Who? Asked his son. Joanna. The English prig? Jack asked. If she would just call, I would be happy that she had not joined the ranks of the homeless, or been murdered. He looked across to Joey, ignoring his son's deliberate comment. You have an English pig? Asked Phoebe, crossing over to them, smiling. It had been a long time since Chandler had seen her. Joey got up and pulled her in for a kiss, and then Chandler hugged her. She hadn't changed. Out of all of them, Chandler could still see their ditzy friend in the long dresses, knitted waistcoats and big jewelry that she wore when they first all started to hang out together. Perhaps choosing an alternative lifestyle was allowing her to keep her youth. No, prig, corrected Chandler, sipping his Coke. And she's not a prig, she's a really nice person. Who are we talking about? Asked Phoebe, nodding in thanks as Ross, who had gone to chat to Mike, came back over with a drink for her. She's English, replied Chandler. What, like Emily? No, she's different to Emily, Phoebe. She has a good sense of humor, we get on extremely well, we have complicated backgrounds in common, I'm still in love with my ex and she's married, apparently. You're still in love with your ex? Asked Joey, looking at Ross. You mean, Monica? That was news to them. And it made some sense, not many people would have put up with what he had endured on Christmas Day from his ex-in-laws otherwise. So, she didn't tell you about Richard, huh? Chandler gave her a double take. Richard? Richard? MHHH, she agreed. Did I say something wrong? She added, as Chandler shot to his feet. I gotta get some air, he said, walking round to the window, pulling up the sash, before stepping out and onto the balcony. Richard, he thought to himself. Richard? What had he got to do with all of this? He leaned his arms on the balcony, then rested his head on them for a second. Richard? He shook his head, then reached into his pocket, to the box he had had in there for almost a week. Monica's Christmas present, earrings like the ones he had got her, with Rachel's help, for their 6-month anniversary. He was still in love with her, this was no lie, not to himself, not to Joanna, to whom he had first openly confessed the fact. It would be good if the planet revolved along feelings alone, but it didn't. There was no future together, not after his separation, their family divided, time having passed while he got himself together. Perhaps there was truth in what Jack had said to him. He couldn't bring himself to be happy or, to some extent, he sabotaged his happiness subconsciously. Perhaps happy scared him, maybe he didn't know what to do with it. Hey! Beside him, soundlessly, the love of his life stood next to him. I saw you come out here. What are you doing? Getting some air, he said. It's been a trying day. Jack told me about ... Joanna, is it? MHH, agreed Chandler. I feel terrible about it. There's some people owe her an apology for prying into her private life like that. Joey said she was nice, Monica said. He also said the stuffed olives were the best he had ever tasted. She stepped closer to him, and looked down into the streets, which were getting filled up now with people waiting to celebrate the change of year. Yeah, well, replied Chandler, smiling at his ex. Joey is a very good actor. They fell into silence as Monica put her hands on his shoulders. He turned. You know, I went looking for her today. She didn't deserve to have her private life discussed amongst strangers. I went all over town. I ended up at the 9/11 memorial. That really brought it home, you know? Life is short. I know, said Monica, soothingly. I'm not angry with you, she added, looking at him, earnestly. I was, once. But now I'm not. We grew apart. You needed the support I was too blind to see I needed to give. You tried your hardest and your job was difficult. I found a way with mine, and with looking after the twins, but excluded you. Not on purpose, but because life made us make difficult choices. Painkillers and alcohol, said Chandler, shaking his head. I got addicted. I wish I had never taken those stupid pills. I'd rather have had the pain of the bus hitting me than taking an addictive painkiller. And I wasn't there. I tried to build my business. And then, it crumbled down, just like that. Everyone in the world knows what they were doing when they heard about the terrorist attacks on the World Trade Center. But, far less knew what they were doing in October 2008. I reckon unchecked capitalism killed more people than 9/11, overall. Loss of business, impact in the family, debt-related illnesses, poorer diets, domestic violence. Chandler turned, drawing her in. I'm sorry, he said, into her hair. I wish I could have done something about it. When I said our wedding vows, I meant them. I still love you, Monica Geller. You do. She pulled back a little, her face one of astonishment. He agreed. Monica smiled widely at his words. I do too, she agreed warmly. Every day that goes by I remember here, our love, our precious something that makes us ... made us a couple. But, I'm a different person, and I have a whole new life. So do you. Your work at Continental is just time-filling. I miss our family, but now the children are grown up, he admitted. I lost so much time with Jack and Erica when I chose to be away. It's my fault he's grown up to act out, and speak to us the way he did at Christmas. Chandler looked serious as he added, I put him in his place. No you didn't, Chandler, I did. How dare he be so astute to think you have a hero complex? It's probably a gay thing, must get it from my dad. Monica smiled again at the obvious joke. Besides, I don't have a hero complex. Rescuing this Joanna? Rescuing me? No, I didn't, he replied. When you said about us being the last two people, trying to chat me up on a plane ... you peed on me when I was stung by a jellyfish. And when I was called Ross' mother at the wedding rehearsal. Which one? Chandler smiled, stepping back. Okay. I guess I do ... but she's different. You teased her, Monica chided, as Chandler raised his eyebrows. She found out. You went to say sorry, there was chemistry. There's no chemistry, Chandler replied. Not according to Joey. It's not like that, she's struggling over getting money for her family ... she's having a hard time. I know something about hard family times. If we have anything, we have friendship chemistry. Did you figure that out before or after you knew she was married? Chandler stepped away, folding his arms. Look, said Monica, stepping over to him. It's okay. People can still be in love and move on in their lives. If she's someone you have feelings for. Ah. Don't. Chandler replied. Don't me, Monica said, looking at him imploringly. I know you, remember? Chandler sagged. She did know him. But he knew her. And she wouldn't be talking to him like this if she wanted to make a go of things again. There would be competition. Okay, he admitted. She needed help. And me and Joey helped. But she's funny, Moan, she makes me laugh and forget all about my worries, you know? She makes me feel safe and happy. Then, go find her, said Monica, pointing out into the city. I looked. Manhattan is a big place, unless you haven't noticed. Well, pour some Lipton's tea over the balcony. Chandler laughed. She's married, though, he said, at length. Thanks to Ross I found out. What will you do? Chandler said nothing for a moment, as the late evening breeze blew past them. He took out the earrings box from his pocket again and turned it over in his fingers. Talk to her. Then he looked at Monica, and frowned. But you know, Moan, all the time I've been with her, she had never once mentioned her husband. In my experience, married women let me know in the first 20 seconds of me saying hi, you know? He took her hand, and then looked out onto the bright lights of New York City. Richard, eh? Richard, agreed Monica. We've been seeing each other for nearly 8 months. It just works, you know. I wanted to tell you. I know. Or at least, I knew you wanted to tell me something. Jack told me anyway that you did. He thinks you're going to tell me you want to make another go of it. Monica smiled. I know. He is idealistic. We all were when we were 18. Not me. I learned cynicism early. Into her hand he placed the box, closing her hand around it. For Christmas. I hope they are the same as the ones that Rachel and Phoebe lost. But you can exchange them if they're not what you want. I'm sure they'll be wonderful, she said, stepping away from him so she could see them in the light of the apartment's window. 3 nosy faces all turned away as she looked in. Chandler bowed his head, acknowledging the closing chapter of his life. He still loved her, and always would. But people move on, and circumstances change. He was about to step in through the window, determined now to enjoy the rest of the party, and turned, looking at his ex-wife in all her beauty, as she examined the earrings. I still love you, Monica Geller Bing, he said, advancing on her quickly. The kiss lasted a second, but it was the seal of the end of their intimate relationship. I can't see it working out, even if Richard was not in the picture. I know, I love you too, Chandler. And these are beautiful. Oh, you would say that anyway, you always did. He made to the window and was about to climb through when Monica hurried over. I need to ask you something, she said quickly, her face reddening in the light of the apartment. I want to ask your blessing. My blessing? Richard has asked me to marry him. The noise from the traffic below faded to nothing, the party atmosphere died down. The last 20 years of his life faded from his mind as he thought of the man who was always, in the end, been at the back of their relationship. Chandler smiled. Yes, he nodded. Marry Richard. Even though he's nearly 70 and he'll be needing a Zimmer frame soon. I heard that, came a voice from inside. Chandler's heart dropped a little, as it always did when his rival was around. But Monica was hugging him close, and he her back. And here, on the Dick Clark's Rockin' New Year's Eve, just 20 minutes to go until 2019, said the voice in the television. Monica walked back into the room, Chandler close behind her as Rachel came over to her, whispering something in her ear which sounded a bit like, "Did it go all right, honey?" When she saw Chandler, she smiled and pointed to the television, adding, "Do you remember when you and Ross went on this?" "Yeah, we had that routine," said Ross, smiling at his sister. "You had a routine?" Richard, taking Monica's hand, as she glanced over her shoulder to Chandler, raised his eyebrows. "Richard, man, can I talk to you for a few minutes?" He let go of Monica's hand and nodded to her as she and Rachel went off to talk to Phoebe. "I never meant to hurt Monica," he began, but Richard raised his hand. "Life is like that, Chandler. I got divorced, people make mistakes, it's called living. Who's to say it won't end for us too? It won't, man, it won't. But if you do what I did to her, there will be violence." Richard laughed, and Chandler joined in, but could not be sure if he was laughing with Monica's fiancé or at his own macho claim, chivalrous though it was. And then it seemed as if the sound had been sucked out of the room. For, outside the open apartment door stood. "Is that the English prig?" Monica asked Jack. Richard looked past Chandler to the door, before crossing over to Monica. Rachel and Phoebe both turned, Ross just then coming to stand by Rachel, the E's, both looking stunning young women, standing next to their parents, all stared. "Hi," said Joe quietly, smiling a little. "Hi, Joe." "Yo!" shouted Joey, from inside, perennially confused, then added, "No," and turned from the door, but not too far that he couldn't hear what was going to be said. Chandler frowned at his friend, and then turned back to Joanna. "Chandler, may I speak to you?" she asked. Joe, "Yeah, sure." He stood still for a few moments before he heard Richard's voice near his ear. "Go to her," he instructed softly. "You came back," he said, stepping out of the apartment and around the corner. The cost of the flights were phenomenal back to Slin, she admitted, her hair a little disheveled and her face a little dirty. "So I've come to ask you for a lift." "Where were you?" he asked. "I was worried, Joe. You could have been anywhere. You could have died, or worse. You could have ended up in Brooklyn. I sat inside the 9/11 memorial all today, till I was kicked out. You know, I went there to find you. I knew you would be there, somehow. I thought I saw you, but it wasn't you," he finished, lamely. "That's kind of you, Chandler," she said, smiling. "And last night?" he pressed. "The YMCA. I helped out with the homeless. I spent the night there, thanking the Lord God Almighty for my fortunes, my children, my family, the man I spent 15 years with, until he died 5 years ago." Chandler looked at her, without speaking. They both knew that Ross had spoken to the palliative care unit. But, died? The nurse had confirmed he was there. "Oh, yes, he's gone," continued Joe, turning so as to hide her fight against her tears, "and won, but only just. No matter what you and your friends found out. Car accident. I nagged him into getting the shopping done early so we could spend the rest of the day going out. And then ended up in hospital, bleeding on the brain. Been in an unconscious coma ever since." "When you say unconscious," Chandler's voice was soft, calm, but Joe refused to turn round. "I mean," she addressed the stairwell, "should his organs ever allow him to support himself, which is unlikely after such a long period of time, he will be so brain damaged that he will be beyond." She broke off. "My marriage ended that day, 13th June. Just because my husband's heart and lungs are fighting the very best fight it can to prove me wrong is a different matter." From the living room, a 5-minute time check was given from Dick Clark. Behind Joanna Lucas, her work colleague touched her on the shoulder. "Joanna." "Don't," she said, turning round, her face stiff and pale. "I'm sorry to have told you this. I don't know how your friends found out the number for his ward, but—" She broke off, changing the subject. "This is a party, for heaven's sake, you don't want me depressing the mood." "Joe. I just hope that 2019. I mean to say that I'm sorry I didn't." "You don't have to say sorry, Joe." 14.13.12. "I wanted to ask you something." 10:9:8. Came Dick Clark. "But, Chandler." Joanna looked into his eyes. The cheering began just before midnight that New Year's Eve at apartment 20. Out in the hallway, two colleagues marked the start of 2019. From his vantage point by the open door, Joey Tribbiani watched as Joanna Lucas pulled Chandler in for a hug, and then kissed him briefly before, a second later, a kiss which was returned unreservedly, and the hug was intensified as if letting go of the woman would mean the end of the world. Music from the stereo brought the two back to earth, and into the new year. Jo stepped back quickly, looking up a little shyly to her work colleague. "Come on," said Chandler, decisively, taking Jo by the hand. "There's at least 3 people in here who owe you an apology." But Jo did not step with him, and let go. "And?" She stared back through at the guests. "But, you're all American tall, beautiful, besides, I'm not dressed for a party." Chandler was about to insist when a slight, slender woman appeared in the doorway as "We don't need no education" filled the room. "Hey, let's have a look at the woman who makes my ex laugh. Joanna, isn't it?" Monica stepped towards her. "Monica," she introduced herself. "The ex. Now, you were invited to a party, and you came. Please, let me escort you in." 88,888,888. 5 hours later, and with various guests sleeping in various places around the apartment, Chandler pulled a blanket over Joanna, before kissing her on the cheek. "Happy New Year," he whispered by her ear, before making his way into his son's room, sleeping fully dressed next to Jack. "So you think he's still in love with you?" A voice from near the window, for 2 people were not asleep, filled the apartment. "Nah, I think he's well past me, Richard," replied Monica, touching the small, platinum stud earrings she had been gifted just a few hours before. She leaned into his arms and he stroked her hair,